I, 31M, married to my wife, 35F, under doubt and insecurity ultimately for a green card. Now we're fighting constantly. What's the best way forward? I am a 31-year-old male who married my wife, a 35-year-old female international student, despite having significant concerns that her motivation for marriage was primarily related to obtaining a green card rather than love. Currently, we are arguing almost weekly, which I largely attribute to my own insecurities, and it is becoming increasingly overwhelming. I am at a loss regarding how to proceed. Note: I utilize ChatGPT to edit and structure my thoughts and writing. I hope this does not lead to my post being flagged. How we met: initial relationship. We encountered each other about a year and a half ago on a dating application while I was residing in Nevada. She lived an hour and a half away in a neighboring town. Right from the beginning, our connection felt intense. I became infatuated and would travel every weekend, occasionally during the week, just to spend time with her. In retrospect, I believe physical intimacy initially played a significant role in sustaining our relationship, but that changed after the abortion. She had a knack for making subtle remarks that made me feel inadequate. It was never linked to a specific incident. It was more of a persistent undertone throughout our interactions. We argued frequently, and while she could be quite harsh, I always sensed that she genuinely cared for me. Initially, I was not fully truthful with her. I claimed that I was attending a better educational institution than I actually was, and omitted the fact that I had withdrawn from college before enlisting in the military. I recognized that this was wrong. My insecurities pushed me to want her to perceive me in a more favorable light. Eventually, she uncovered the truth, and while this created tension between us, her manner of communicating with me had already been an issue from the very beginning. Relocating for her concerning signs, she was in the process of applying to graduate school, and I offered to move wherever she chose. She later indicated that my willingness meant a lot to her, but now she often mentions it sarcastically, implying that I did not fully understand what I was committing to. We fought often, at times breaking up only to reconcile later. During one of those disputes, she stated, "Can I just go down to Washington and start over?" That remark lingered with me, leading me to question whether she wanted to be in a relationship with me or simply needed assistance with her move. Not long after, she shared that her family was genuinely facing financial difficulties and that she needed support. Shortly after revealing my income, albeit past earnings, she half-jokingly but seriously asked, "Will you give me your bank account?" I found the moment unsettling. She also made another unsettling joke that I still remember. She remarked that in her next life, I could be her dog while she would have a husband. Before our move to Washington, I expressed my fear that she might only see me as a means to obtain a green card. She reacted with anger and disgust, claiming she could not believe I held such a thought and that I was disrespecting her. While I felt guilty for voicing my concerns, those fears persisted. Regardless of these issues, we remained together, and I relocated with her when she left for Washington. The abortion increasing distance at one point, we had to undergo an abortion. I realize it may seem selfish to mention sex following such an event, but I have developed increasing resentment toward her for rejecting my advances. It has reached a point where I no longer feel comfortable expressing my sexual needs, feeling guilty for having them in the first place, and yet the constant rejection intensifies my resentment. When I once expressed my feelings about her lack of initiative, she responded, "I never found you sexually attractive, let alone anyone." That response truly hurt. After relocating to Washington, I discovered that I had been accepted into a nearby school. By then, we were already cohabiting. We experienced another pregnancy scare, and I suggested we marry so she could be added to my health insurance. She appeared to be deeply touched by this offer. Getting married my reservations on the day we were scheduled to marry, I froze. I simply couldn't go through with it. All of my doubts flooded my mind and I panicked. We walked out of the courthouse, and in the car, she inquired what was troubling me. I couldn't provide her with an answer. She was heartbroken. She tossed our paperwork into the trash, began driving, then abruptly halted the car in the middle of the road and walked away, expressing that she could not bear to be near me. I pursued her, attempting to convince her to return home, but she repeatedly told me to leave her alone. Eventually, feeling overwhelmed and unsure of my next step, I drove away. A few minutes later, she called me, crying. I reassured her that I had not actually departed, and when I returned, I found her being comforted by a passerby. Upon re-entering the car, she asked, "So, are you going to marry me or not?" I replied, "Okay." We drove back, retrieved the paperwork, and went through with the marriage. Post-marriage, continued arguments, resentment. Since then, it has been a recurring cycle. Things are fine for a while, then we argue again. She says things that irritate me, I react, and then she retaliates with something even more hurtful. Currently, I am responsible for all our expenses. At one point, she expressed frustration that I was covering my mother's and sister's 15-phone bill, which I had set up previously, insisting that it was her money too. She also articulated her worries about the future, concerned that if my family ever required assistance, I would feel financially obligated to help them. I assured her that she need not worry about this, and that our finances would remain independent of my family's needs. After that dispute, she made it clear that her finances, especially her future earnings, which will likely surpass mine, are her own, and how she chooses to allocate her money for her family is completely separate from our relationship. Recently, her remarks during arguments have been increasingly hurtful. She has said things like, "If I had chosen the other guy, you wouldn't have had a chance. I feel so unlucky, my friends all married husbands who do everything for them. You are weak, and I am doing everything in this relationship." Note, I understand she makes these comments out of frustration due to my emotional instability and insecurity. Most recent argument before this post. Things had been going relatively well until this past weekend, which was my birthday. The day before, we attended a concert and had a good time, but I started to feel the old resentment creeping in, which I tried to suppress. On my birthday, we were proceeding with our typical routines, and all day, I was gauging whether she remembered or had anything planned for me. By 8 p.m., I realized she had forgotten, so I questioned whether the day held any significance for her. She looked at the date in disbelief, felt genuinely remorseful, and attempted to comfort me. Even though I knew she was making an effort, we went out for dinner, and she paid. Although I could tell she felt bad, I could not shake my disappointment. The following day, she sought to make amends by going out for pastries. I acknowledged that I may be overthinking, but she wore glittery makeup that she knows I do not particularly like, although I have never criticized her for it. It was just an observation I made. On our way back home, I indirectly revisited the green card issue. I told her that I still struggled with feeling used, which infuriated her. She called me disgusting for even considering that, claiming I should be ashamed of doubting her and that I was disrespecting her once more. At this point, I began spiraling into my usual cycle of insecurity and low self-esteem. She then told me, "I am exhausted by this. I can't continue anymore. I simply want a stable relationship, and I know I'm doing my best. Are you? If you wish to proceed with divorce or annulment, go ahead. If you believe you are doing me a favor by this green card, then just forget it and let's finalize things." I want to emphasize that during our previous arguments, she brought this matter up as well, and we managed to work through it. She claimed she had given me too many chances, and that this would likely happen again. Recognizing my own faults, I realize this post reflects a lot of negativity. However, it is important to note that this situation is not one-sided. I believe she genuinely cares for me and attempts to show it in her own way. I acknowledge that I have made mistakes, such as being dishonest at the outset, being overly sensitive and emotionally unstable, never violent or physically abusive or intentionally psychologically harmful, being selfish in expressing my sexual desires after the abortion, and grappling with my insecurities and the responsibilities inherent in a serious relationship. I have never said anything to diminish her worth. I feel I have tried in my own way, but I know I could do more to improve our situation, and I simply do not know how to move forward. What should I do next? At this point, we are arguing almost every week, and I feel trapped. I struggle to resolve my own uncertainties. There are moments when I look back and cherish the good experiences and the love she demonstrates, and I genuinely feel remorseful when I consider those moments and how I have treated her. When I inquire about what I can do differently, she consistently advises me to focus on my responsibilities. Personally, I find it challenging to concentrate wholly on my tasks given the current circumstances. I recognize that this is not the most mature response, and I perceive my weakness in this regard. As I write this, we are both engaged in our responsibilities, tackling schoolwork, reminding each other of household chores, and managing everything we need to accomplish as if nothing significant has transpired between us. I understand this is part of our adult responsibilities. I cannot allow my emotions to interfere with life. I would greatly appreciate any guidance on how to navigate this situation moving forward. Note, I acknowledge that my perspective could be unrealistic and that I may have a naive view of relationships. She has stated that nobody can guarantee a marriage will last forever, and the only constant is change. And she has asked, what harm does it do to be with me now, even if it ends up being temporary? She assures me that she would never intentionally harm me and that she considers my feelings when thinking about her future. I realize she may be much better suited than I am, and maybe I should act with compassion and run away like my father did, to let her find someone who is a better match for her.